Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Somehow I got the wrong name tag. I'm not Johnny Depp. I am Mark Vaillancourt, so that part's actually true. A tiny bit about me. Certification stuff. Been a Microsoft MVP for a couple of months. Woo! A past regional mentor. We can talk later about what that's about. Notice to get in touch with me, it's Mark VSQL. I'm not making anybody try to spell Vaillancourt to try to get in touch with me because I'll never hear from you. So, also I do have my own Twitter hashtag. You're welcome to use it. So it's Mark VSQL is handsome and witty. Please feel free. So I think it was it last year or the year before? Somebody asked on Twitter, who's on Twitter? Anybody? A couple people? If you're not, fix it. First off, the SQL community on Twitter is absolutely amazing. Just even from the camaraderie standpoint, but also if you're stuck in a situation, you're like, oh man, I'm having this going on. What can I do? And you'll just get bombarded with ideas and articles. Oh, go read this, or I had that and I did this. It's amazing. But a couple of years ago, somebody asked what the official Twitter hashtag was for the SQL Server Pass Summit. And so I told them it's pound SQL Pass or pound Summit 13 or Mark VSQL is handsome and witty. I did it the one time just being weird because clearly I am. And people kind of took it and ran with it. And it was kind of awesome to see it pop up out of the blue. Somebody would just tweet about something and they would just attach this, whether it was related or not. So, it's on the internet, so it has to be true. I am handsome and witty. So today, here's our basic agenda, right? So it's keeping the business in business intelligence. And it's not just a clever name. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what business intelligence is. So for show of hands, who's like a business intelligence developer? Maybe a couple. And most are like analysts, whether business analysts, data analysts, maybe project managers. Any professional jugglers? I'm not either. I'm awful. So we're going to talk about what business intelligence is. And for those of us that are developers, I think this is important information to keep in mind when we are doing development work for BI, to remember why we're doing that development work. We're going to talk about why BI matters. Because some people might say, hey, why would we bother doing that? It just seems like a big expense. What would we get out of it? I'm going to show you. What does successful BI look like? So you often see people talk about all the time, here's why BI fails, or here's how to succeed in BI. But I've almost never seen anybody talk about, here's what it means to be successful with BI. So I'm going to talk about that today. Why do 70+% of BI projects fail? There's a footnote there to an article. So Gartner recently estimated that fewer than 30% of BI projects actually succeed at meeting all the goals of the project. So fewer than 30%. So the failure rate for BI is really high. And there are some common reasons for that. Not that this is the answer to everything, but there are some common threads that often lead to failure in BI. What are BI critical success factors? What are the things that have been shown time and time again to contribute very highly to putting your project in the 30% instead of the 70%? And then we're going to talk a little bit, okay, now that you have all this information, now what do we do? Okay? All right, first, what is business intelligence? So can anybody tell me in their own words how you would describe what business intelligence is? I'll pick on Melissa if nobody raises their hand.
Oh, aren't you sweet?
Okay, Stephen did.
Business intelligence lets you make more profitable decisions for your business by using your data.
Okay, using your data to make more profitable decisions for your business. Anyone else?
My favorite definition, which I read somewhere, was getting the right information to the right people at the right time.
Okay, that's a very good one. Any more? That's a pretty good.
Data into actionable insight or...
Yep, turning data into actionable insight, right? So those are actually pretty brief, pretty concise definitions. They're not all that way. Just checking time. Okay, good. So here's one from Wikipedia, one from Gartner. I'm not going to read to you because I can't stand that when I'm in a presentation and people read to me because I can read. But you can see there's a lot going on in both of these. Right? There's a lot of words there. There's a lot of things that you kind of have to juggle to wrap your head around that definition in both cases. They're both, you know, it's a set of terms, of theories, of methodologies. There's a lot to it, and with one of the main goals of those of us in BI is to try to make things simpler. I don't think we capture that with those. So I'd like to propose a different definition of what BI is. Better decisions through evidence. Period. So whether you're doing, you know, when BI first started, people talked about the decision support systems. Okay? Totally works. People talk about performance management systems. Well, why do you measure performance? Anybody know? So you can make decisions about what to do, what not to do, what to do more of, what to do less of. So however you slice it, right, however you boil it down, essentially you get to this, making better decisions with evidence. And notice it's not making better decisions through data. There's a lot of data out there. And a lot of that data is really not suitable for making decisions on. So that word evidence is a key part of this. Because when you talk about evidence, you talk about something that has passed some level of litmus test to be deemed trustworthy. Right? So in the court of law, it's passed the test of here's what legally counts as evidence. It's gone through the judge's criteria. Here's what legally counts as evidence. So that evidence, yes, it's based on your data, but it's all about boiling down to really what's important in your data and making sure that data is clean and accurate before you can make actionable decisions on it. So if somebody came up to me and said, you know what, I work in an organization, we don't trust any of our reporting, our data quality stinks, we want you to build an enterprise data warehouse. My response is not going to be what's your time frame. It's going to be time out, right? Back up, take a breath. Because if you don't have a handle on your data, if you can't get it to the point of making it actionable evidence, then you're not ready for that. You have to tackle one thing at a time. Very important. So why does BI matter? So this quote actually comes from The Economist, and it was an article about big data. But I think it has a lot of parallels to BI. Because when I think about big data, what I think about that, as other than just being a buzzword, because there's some cool stuff to it as well, is that these big data initiatives are essentially allowing us to do business intelligence on data that otherwise we may not have been able to. Whether it's moving too fast, we can't capture it in a data warehouse because by the time we load it, it's stale. It's not valuable anymore, right? So for me, from my perspective, big data is an extension of the business intelligence mindset. It's an extension of that framework. It's gathering evidence from either vast quantities of data or really variable data, very semi-structured data, gathering that evidence to make decisions. So to me, big data and BI go together really, really, really well. So if I hear someone say, oh, we're not doing BI, we're doing big data, I don't think they get either one. I think they're lost a little bit. But the fact is, of companies outperforming their competitors, they have a much higher rate of having their executives value data extremely highly. That's not an accident, because they're taking advantage of that better decisions through evidence. They're not relying as much on gut or the finger to the wind or just intuition. They're making decisions, not guesses, not hunches. Really important stuff. So, I was working at, this one actually comes from my own experience, at a mortgage industry service provider. And they had come to Digineer, they had started a proof of concept for an analysis services cube to track pretty much the most important measures, the most important metrics for their business, for reporting to their clients. So as they described it to me, they couldn't tell you the value of that most important metric at the state level, or at the city level, or across different types of customers. They just didn't have that capacity, it wasn't there. This company hadn't done BI before, they didn't have stuff organized in order to do this. So he had started up this proof of concept, And they came to Digineer because for one reason or another, they couldn't continue with that previous developer. And Digineer told me, I said, hey, we want you to lead this pursuit and, you know, answer this RFP and see if we can land this business. And I said, okay, but here's the thing, because they're asking for me to complete the proof of concept cube. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna submit that, and I'm gonna submit an alternative with analysis services tabular, and by the way, they're gonna pick the second one, just so you know. It's exactly what happened. It was a really good candidate for using tabular, which still at the time was actually very, very new. But as far as the technology goes, it enabled some really cool analytics for them to be able to do that was much easier. So they were able to ramp up a lot faster, so to get to that evidence, to get to those bid decisions quicker. Even though it was finishing in the cube or starting over with tabular, the tabular was faster. It's really interesting, really interesting. But they were noticing, during that project, they were noticing a double-digit increase in the commissions paid out to their contractors, their contract appraisers. People going out appraising houses for refinances and for purchases, mostly refinances at the time. And they noticed, suddenly, we have a double-digit increase in what we're paying them. And it was hitting the bottom line of the company. It went all the way up to the president of the company, was like, what is going on with that? Where's our money going, right? So during this proof of concept, somebody had an idea. My client had an idea of what it might have been. He was able to take that unfinished proof of concept I was working on. He said, can you make sure you've got data loaded up to here, up to like this date? And I was sure. And I had that, and it was still dev at the time, but it was real data. It was just still dev. He was able to go in, do a pivot table on top of the tabular model that I wasn't even done with, and prove not only the correlation and the causation, he was able to nail exactly, this is where we made a change in our rules engine that decides how appraisers get paid, etc. He was able to make that pinpoint and say, there's our problem, right there. It happened right exactly when we did that. And they were able to go through, scour through the code in that one section of code that they changed and find exactly what the problem was. And it was something they hadn't tested for. But they were able to use this BI solution to find it. So they were able to decide right then, we have to roll this back or we have to change it, whatever the case may be. But it was that BI that, you know, the fact that typical reporting can tell you, hey, we're paying a bunch more to our appraisers. Have a nice day. That's what typical reporting does. But with BI, he was able to go through and determine why they were suddenly paying all that much more to their appraisers. Really cool stuff. So we have a major US retailer noticed that they had contractors that were coming in that were buying paint. But they weren't buying any of the supplies associated with paint. So they weren't buying paintbrushes and drop cloths and stuff like that. And so they were trying to figure out, well, why are we missing out on all these sales? So we had already been doing some BI for them, so they were able to dig through their data and see that contractors tended to come at midweek as opposed to on Mondays and Fridays. They had been putting their contract salespeople, the people specifically dealing with contractors, mostly on Mondays and Fridays. Contractors mostly came midweek. That's a flyby. That doesn't work. Because the people that are selling to those customers, the customers weren't there when they were there. So they were able to see that exact pattern. They changed when they had their own salespeople devoted to contractors coming in and said, why don't you guys come midweek? And the sales to contractors started going up. They started selling paintbrushes. They started selling them drop cloths. All the stuff associated with painting, they started selling to the contractors because they changed their own behavior as a direct result of the evidence in their BI system. It gave them the evidence. They knew exactly what they needed to do. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a hunch. They saw it in black and white. So here's another one that I was doing a demo for. This was the first time the client had seen their BI system. I was showing them Excel pivot tables going against the analysis services cube that we had built. They had never seen it before. It was older data, but it was real data. So it was production data, just a bit stale. So a couple minutes into that demo, somebody said, what's that? They saw a number on the screen that they didn't like. It was really high and it shouldn't have been. And everybody's looking around, yeah, what is that? They took over the demo and told me what to click, what to filter on. As soon as they said, what's that? I knew that this demo is actually it's about to be a home run. Because now they're going to start manipulating. So we went in and filtered down through the data, and they said, can you filter by this? Can you cross through that? Can you just do these guys? And within 10 minutes, they saw some of the data that was leading to exactly why that number was high, and everybody around the room was writing down action items to take based on that data. So this is not even 15 minutes into the first demo with the system, and they already had actionable insight to be able to go and make a change for the good. The first demo of the system, it wasn't even in production yet. That's the power of BI, that ability to explore and lead you to the questions that you didn't know to ask before. That's what BI does. So a lot of people will say, a good system should provide you with answers. And that's true. You should get some answers. But a really good BI system should give you questions too. So here's a quote from Gartner that, again, I'm not going to read to you. I'm going to take a drink while you read. So it's more of the same kind of thing that we've been talking about, but the key here is that you first need to recognize the problem that you want to solve with it. And I think that's where a lot of BI goes astray, is it tries to be everything. We're going to make this one thing that's going to be this panacea, and everything is going to be great, and people will join hands and raise their voices in song. So let's talk a little bit about what successful BI looks like. If you think about it, there's really two major processes when it comes to a BI solution. There's the process performance, the performance of implementing said BI. And then there's the infrastructure, which is assessing the quality of what the result is. And we're going to break these down a little bit further. So in terms of process, one of the key ones is time and schedule. Basically, hey, did you start on time? Did you meet milestones? Did you finish on time? And a lot of this boils down to effective project management, right? So that's really important. To help keep this on track is really, really key. Because if you have a BI system, maybe it's a wonderful system, but if it was supposed to take 3 months and it takes 2 years, you can't really call that success. In terms of geologic time, it's not much different. But we're not building mountains. Budget is another clear one with process. And again, this is associated with project management and closely related to time and schedule in terms of the number of resources you have, working for how long, etc. Basically, are you within budget? Is there clear risk mitigation? Are there change control procedures in place to make sure that if you encounter a stoppage, you encounter something you have to get around, you deal effectively with the business community to make sure that you can get that taken care of properly. So these two are about the process of implementing it. Project management is really, really key here. In terms of infrastructure for performance, the resulting system quality. Is it flexible and scalable? Is it able to integrate data? Is it, hey, we have 4 source systems, but our BI system only looks at 1? That doesn't win. Sorry. Is it flexible? Can it answer only one type of question? I have 10 questions. Can it only answer 4? Right? So if it's not flexible, and part of this has to do with making sure that you architect it properly, so it really captures the essence of what the business needs, not just the one question they have or the 1 or 2 reports that they expect. Because if you architect 2 reports, okay, what if they come up with another report idea? Right? So flexible, scalable. Can it grow with the new data coming in? Or is it already at the maximum size that's going to support, and when you add more data, it crumbles? So system quality. Information quality. This is really important as well. Is the information accurate? Right? Can you trust that an order that's being reported as having been a $50 order is actually $50? Because if it's $168, that's a little off. Is it complete? Right? If you have questions that need answering, if you want to calculate your margin, if you want to calculate various other business metrics, do you have the information to answer those? Because if you don't, then it's not complete. Is it timely? It's great to have really thorough information, but it's from 7 years ago. Okay. If that's the most recent information, certainly it's not timely. Is it consistent? So an order from last year, So it was, this order from last year was for client A, and it was for $50. If I look at it tomorrow, and it says that order was from client B, and it was $78, that's not consistent. That's another problem. Is it relevant and useful? Is it information you can do stuff with? So if you're tracking the profit and loss of your consulting business, having the amount of money spent on the napkins for the break room doesn't necessarily help you all that much, unless you're going through a lot of napkins, right? So the information quality, and a lot of this has to do with making sure that you're ready to be implementing a BI system. And if you don't trust your data at all, if it's really junk, then you might not be. System use. Do people use the thing? How many people have seen stuff get built that goes on a shelf? Hey, look at that, that's great. And they move on and they never touch it again, right? And it's not just senior executives using it. It's the right people using the right information. So for a long time, BI was really essentially for the senior people, for the CEO to get, you know, dashboards or whatever, a handful of people. We're getting to the point now where people are realizing that anybody that makes decisions can make better ones with the information to support them. So junior level managers can make better decisions if they have information to base those decisions on. So it's not just the C-suite people that need that. So the right people using the right data. And are they integrating it into your decision making? So even though they're getting reports, maybe they're getting dashboards, maybe they're playing around with the data, but if they ignore all that when they make their decisions, then you can hardly call the system successful, because they may as well have it on a shelf. So really, really key stuff. So this, essentially, if your BI system meets all of these, you can definitely call that a success, because it's being used, it's being good, it's great stuff, and people can get actionable insight out of it. All right, how are we doing? Good. So, why do 70+% of BI projects fail? First, the Field of Dreams approach. So, who's seen the movie Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, right? You said your finger was a gun. Oh, that kills me. So the whole time he's thinking about building this field, and he's hearing that voice, if you build it, they will come. And for a lot of organizations, this is their BI strategy. So maybe the CIO or somebody is in an airport and they read a magazine article about a data warehouse, and they come back and say, hey, we need a data warehouse now. There's great justification. So we're going to build it, and we're going to put all this stuff in it, and the business users will just use it, they'll love it. Right? Now, Bill Inman, one of the fathers of data warehousing, as it were, in an article, it's sourced, I've got a little footnote there, he actually argues that this can be a reasonable approach. But he does caution that sometimes they do come and sometimes they don't come. This approach isn't necessarily doomed to fail. However, the likelihood of success is a lot higher if you talk to the business first. It goes up a lot, it seems to me. Right? So one of the things he argues is that until you show people something, they don't know what's available. So his, I don't mean to pick on Bill, and I reached out to him on Twitter to get comments. Anyway, I don't mean to pick on him, but he went to Africa, and they took a boat ride, right? So it was very Heart of Darkness-y, very Apocalypse Now, except without the guns and the blowing up and stuff. And they actually encountered this tribe that had never seen or heard of refrigeration before. And they gave them ice-cold Cokes, right? So this is something for them that they would have never in a million years, if somebody said, hey, what would you like? They would have said, you know what, I want a cold drink. Because they wouldn't have thought of that. So the parallel he's making there is that if people don't know what's available, they don't know to ask for it. But at the same time, you don't need to build this huge thing to let them know what's available. And at the same time, people in the middle of Africa with no refrigeration, giving them an ice-cold Coke helps them for the duration of that ice-cold Coke. And after that, they are Cokeless again. So how are they going to take advantage of knowing that there's ice-cold Cokes without refrigeration? So it doesn't help them long-term. And I don't think he was thinking about it this way, but this is my interpretation of it. It doesn't help them long-term. So you cannot consider these tribespeople acceptable users of ice-cold Coke, because they got it the one time. It's a flash in the pan and it's done. Now they don't have it anymore. It didn't change their daily life. They are not using ice cold Coke to make better decisions, which I don't think you can do anymore. Incidentally, this is actually at the field in Dyersville, Iowa, where they filmed Field of Dreams. So I went to Sequel Saturday, Iowa last year, and the whole family came, and it's actually there. I went out in the field and I took it. So I took it. Which is why it doesn't have any URL. I always put image URLs, but I took that myself. That was fun. That was really cool. So, another reason BI projects fail. Boiling the ocean. Trying to have the BI system be everything to everybody. Right? You say, hey, what would you like? What do you need in your data warehouse? Oh, everything. Time out. Take a breath. Let's back up. While we may eventually get to having a big chunk of your data in your data warehouse, let's calm down, because if we just do a project, oh, let's put everything in the data warehouse right now. Too much data, too little strategy. Not being smart about how you do it. Not being smart about the steps, how it evolves. Trying to do it all at one time is crazy. I thought that was fun. I laughed out loud when I made this slide, I confess. I had a good time with that one. One of my marketing people said, you know, data doesn't have an S, right? I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's funnier with the S. So, poor data quality, right? Implementing BI before you have any kind of data quality control procedures in place, before you really know what's going on with your data. So, we have 20 million new customers in Minnesota. Just quick, does anybody see an issue with this?
Pretty sure there's actually only people that live in Minnesota.
You were actually correct, but 5.4 million people. So how they can get 28 million new customers? Maybe they're using Bimmel to generate new customers. Right? It's funny you're in this room, I'm just saying. So, I mean, this is a problem that is frequent. Not to this extent. I mean, I did this one because it's a little bit funnier and I want to make you guys laugh and you know, hide the fact that I don't know what I'm talking about. No, I'm just kidding. But if people can't trust their data, if you can't trust the data you get out of your system, then maybe you need to go upstream. Putting a BI solution on top of it isn't necessarily going to fix it. Because if the source data is really, really, really bad, building BI on top of source data that's really, really, really bad is going to be a really, really, really bad BI system. You will have just spent money. Because, right? Why not get pizza instead? Much better use of that money. So, in terms of data quality, you think of things like data governance. So more and more places are putting data governance steps in place, right? Even maybe data governance personnel, entire departments that are there to help manage data, right? You were talking about the MDM solution that you're working on, right? That master data management. The idea of making sure that everybody in the organization knows who our clients are. And then if I look at order 1, 2, 3, we all agree Bob placed that order. Because if some people think it was Bob, and some people think it was Sheila, and maybe Sheila lives in another country and would never come and buy pizza from us or something, right? If nobody agrees on what's going on, then it's really, really hard to have good data quality.
Mark,
Yes?
on the data quality issue, seems like in every freaking project I do, the user acceptance testing doesn't get the effort that it should.
Yep.
And then I pay the price later because it's a crisis to get it fixed.
Yes.
You know, and I get it that the business users are busy and they give it a cursory look. I actually get it. We're all busy and say, oh yeah, I'm sure that it's right. And then of course whether or not there's a UAT person looking at BI is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can't force them to go through this massively long checklist.
Right.
But I tell you what, that just is a pain point all the time, it seems.
It is definitely a pain point. And I think part of it, you know the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? You can sure as hell make him thirsty. So if you make people well aware of the fact that their data is the lifeline of their business, and their data is such an important part of their job, right? Your salary is data in a system. Suppose that got reduced because of data quality issues. You'd be pretty mad. And you would wish you had done that UAT, right? So yes, you can't force people to do UAT. And on that system where we had that what's that moment, that system, up until then, the key stakeholder was the president of the company. The SMEs didn't care at all about the BI system. And we're very busy. And so UAT was a joke. And requirement approval, because of their timeline, had a built-in, if we don't hear from you, if we submit requirements for your approval and don't hear anything for 3 days, we can't wait. With this timeline, we can't. We have to go. That's an approval. And that's how a lot of stuff got approved. But with the timeline that they imposed, there was no way, and they would not listen on budget. After that meeting, those same SMEs were coming up to me, how can we help? Once they saw that, once they saw the value of what was going on, it was how can we help? And one of the things about that project that was very frustrating for me as a developer, and I learned a lot from, was that was well into the project that first demo took place. And that's a major problem. Because the sooner you can get in front of the users, the sooner you guys as business users, the sooner you can see something, right? If you see an initial prototype within the first couple of weeks of a project, you can give kind of a yes, you're in the right direction, or no, you totally blew it. You can get that. So you think of rapid prototyping tools, Power Pivot's amazing for this. To be able to do a quick proof of concept with your data. Let me show you something. Give me a couple tables, even export them to a file. Let me show you something, right? The sooner that you can get business users to see with their own data the value of what's possible, the sooner you can get them on board and they'll help you with the requirements. And another thing about Power Pivot that's excellent is if you get some savvy business users in there playing with it, they'll build the requirement for you. Even if it's not a tabular model, you at least know, here's what I need to build. They've already vetted this. They've already used this. So Power Pivot is just an amazing tool. Any day I get to work at Power Pivot, I'm a happy guy. I'm loving Power Pivot. So, what we got here is failure to communicate. Poor communication will scuttle a BI project very, very quickly, or worse, very, very slowly. Communication is really important. From getting stuff in front of the business users as soon as you can to get that feedback from them quickly. From not going away on your own and developing something in a vacuum and interpreting the requirements how you feel like it and say, oh, this will be fun, I'll do it this way. That doesn't work. So poor communication, keeping the business in business intelligence means literally keeping the business in business intelligence. Talk to them frequently, right? Face-to-face is better. On the BI implementations I've done a little bit remote, more of it in person, and being there, being able to walk up to a SME's desk with a quick question, way easier than sending an email that they may not look at for several hours. Way easier. So being physically present helps. It's not an outright requirement if you get people that are responsive, but frequent, detailed communication is really, really, really important with BI because you can go off track really quickly. And once you've gone off track, you start moving faster. Well, now you're moving faster in the wrong direction, so it doesn't necessarily help. Who's here seen the movie Stand By Me? Right? I love that movie. I absolutely love that movie. And the Family Guy spoof of it just kills me. So lack of alignment with corporate objectives and strategy. One of the things this stems from is not keeping the business in the business intelligence. Doing something on your own, deciding for the business what they're going to value. Doesn't necessarily work. You may guess and be right, but then you're guessing and you're not making better decisions through evidence, right? So Vern, the whole time, is proud of himself. He's psyched. Guys, I brought the comb. What's their goal in the film? It's an old enough movie, I don't think we have to worry about ruining it. What's their goal in the movie? What would you sum up as the prime objective of these 4 kids in the movie Stand By Me? Anyone? What's that? No?
To see a dead body?
To see a dead body. They want to go see the body of Ray Brower, who was hit by a train up off the old Harlow Road, right? That's their goal. Can someone explain to me why a comb helps? It doesn't. So yes, he brought the comb. That's awesome. Right? And so, thank you, Marty. It's like, why do we need a comb for? You don't even have any hair, right? It does not help with their overall strategy. So even BI, with the best of intentions, saying this would be great information for the business to have. If the business is focused on that, though, and the BI you're working on doesn't go towards that, are they going to use it? Probably not. So it's really important to involve people in the business that have an idea where the strategy goes, what the strategy is, and what information is going to help support that strategy. So that's one of the advantages of, people talk about agile BI development. It's essentially that being able to pivot, being able to pivot and change direction if you need to, based on the changes in the business goals. Because if you go and do an 18-month project, by the time that 18-month project is done, it might not make sense anymore. But if you're working on a project that is aligned with the goals and you're making baby steps, if you have to turn a little bit with each baby step, you can do that. So alignment with corporate strategy is really, really important for people to even want to use it and for it to be of value and for it to meet the ROI standards that the people with the purse strings are going to demand. So let's talk about some critical success factors. Let's talk about some things that have been shown to help your BI project or your BI program more specifically. Because BI shouldn't really be a project with a start and end. It should be a series of projects, right? It should be this ongoing, living, breathing entity. Committed management support and sponsorship. Who's seen the show Firefly? Yeah. Right? A handful of nerdy people. Great sci-fi show. It lasted 1 season. That's heartbreaking. It was Joss Whedon, the guy that did Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and so the dialogue is really quick and fun. I absolutely adore this show. I've watched it a bunch of times. Whenever I'm homesick, Firefly goes in, and I'm okay. So, Captain Malcolm Reynolds, played by Nathan Fillion, is the captain of this ship, the Serenity. Well, not the Serenity, it's just Serenity. Well, there's a scene where another member of the crew, who he doesn't really like that much, he and his sister are captured by these Hills people. And they decide that she's a witch and they're going to burn them at the stake. It's a kid's show. No, it's really not. And they have this conversation afterwards because Malcolm Reynolds and the team, they go and they rescue these people and they bring them back to Serenity. And, nobody really got burned, so, hey, look at that. And Simon's asking him why he came back. So, why'd you come back for us? And Mal just says, you're on my crew. And Simon still can't believe it. Says, you don't even like me. What did you do this for? And this is key. This is telling. You're on my crew. Why are we still talking about this? Mal, as a leader, is willing to stand up, and he's willing to fight, and do what he has to for his crew, for his people. He is a very committed manager, and he provides that committed sponsorship, including going into harm's way to rescue people who are going to be very crispy soon, right? This is the kind of sponsorship that you need for a BI engagement, for a BI program. You need somebody that's high up in the company that sees the value, that can help you break down whether it be the political barriers, whether it be enticing people to use it, or if you have to, mandating people use it until they see the value and then they'll want to use it. And people will look over and say, I'll have what she's having, right? From a Harry with Sally. So that's really, really important that you can have somebody high up enough in the organization that gives a crap about BI and about data that's willing to fight for it. Because to a lot of people, they're going to see the BI initiative as, wow, that's an expensive thing. What are we getting out of this now? Because we already have a database. Why do we need BI? Access is working fine for us. clear vision, well-established business case. This comes back to involving the business, right? Making sure that what you're doing has a goal to it other than, hey, we want to have BI. Because implementing BI because you want to have BI doesn't make sense. You have to have some goal in mind, right? So that well-established business case, that alignment with the company goal. We have this goal. We need to achieve this. We need this kind of information, this kind of evidence to support decisions to do that effectively. So if you think of the Blues Brothers, people have seen the Blues Brothers, whether it be the older one or the newer one, right? Basically, they have a clear goal of getting $5,000 to the Cook County Assessor's Office by the next day at like 9 a.m. That's a very clear goal. That essentially is the business case behind what they're dealing with, right? And their vision is to get the band back together. It's very clear. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through this step. We're going to get the band back together. We're going to put on a show. We're going to make money. And we're going to go get that money so that the orphanage we grew up in doesn't have to close. If you think about it, it's simple. This movie doesn't have to be as long as it is, right? But they had a very, very clear goal in mind. They had a very clear series of steps of what they needed to do. They knew what they needed to gather in order to get it done. And the gathering of getting the band back together, well, in itself was not the goal. It was one of the steps in the process. It was a one step at a time process. They didn't immediately go like rob a gas station or something like that to try to get $5 grand. That's a big gas station. But they had an idea of where they were going and they knew what they had to do to get there. Business-centric championship and balanced team composition. So it's very, very important that when you have someone on the BI team that straddles the worlds of the business and the technical side, that can talk to both sides. So if you remember from Star Trek Next Generation, there were the Borg, right? So the Borg were these cybernetic life forms, not all that friendly, to be honest. And they captured Captain Picard. It's old enough. They captured Captain Picard, and they made him a Borg, Locutus of Borg. They were brilliant in doing this because they captured somebody that could span the gap between the Borg and humanity, that gave them insight into what the humans were after, what the humans were like. He was a very, very effective champion for the Borg in dealing with the humans, who were pretty ticked off, to be honest. They weren't that happy, right? So, as part of this being really important, he was spanning the gap. And that's really important. Because if you have somebody that's on the business side, but doesn't have any kind of technical knowledge to be able to translate what they need to the technical people, or if you have somebody way on the technical side that doesn't get the business, it's going to be really difficult. So you need that person that can do both, that can put their foot in both places and have that effective translation. Because without this person, that communication, that's really, really important. You don't want a failure to communicate. This person helps prevent that cause of BI failure. Really, really.
Wayne Epperson calls those purple people.
What's that?
Wayne Epperson calls those purple people.
Purple people?
Yeah, because they're not blue, they're not red.
Yeah, I suppose.
You're one of either, they're
Yep,
purple. Yeah.
the purple people.
Purple people.
The purple
So-
people.
If you don't have, if you don't have one of these people, is it that you're not looking hard enough, or can you substitute it with a consultant, or what do you do if you don't think you have
If you
one?
can substitute it with a consultant that really understands your industry, that can be a big step, right? Really understands your industry, but also has that technical background. So sometimes in an organization, you may not have this person, and it may be feasible to go out and get a consultant to help you with this. Because a consultant that knows your vertical, so if you're in the healthcare industry, if you're in the insurance industry, if you have maybe a project manager or a business analyst or whatever that really knows your vertical and knows overall how your business works, you can bring them up to speed on the idiosyncrasies of your specific case, and they will be able to help you translate to the technical team. So if you don't have one, you can get one. They just might have to be brought up to speed about the particulars of your business, because everybody's a little bit different, right? Whether you're in the insurance industry, there's stuff that you do that you might do a little differently from everyone else. Obviously, the regulatory stuff, the key stuff, is the same everywhere, and if they have that knowledge, that's a win, right? So it's finding that person, even if you have to go externally, to help bridge that gap. But that role is incredibly important, to make sure that you're clearly communicating to the technical team exactly what they need to do. So within Digineer, I've told people all the time that, you know, we on the technical team, because we're rolling out a BI offering, and we on the technical team are not as important as our business analysts and our PMs, because we can build just about anything. Just about anything. We can find a way to build it. But if it's the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how effectively you build the wrong thing, it's still the wrong thing. You could build it brilliantly, it could be awesome, but if it's wrong, who cares, right? So this person helps a lot in making sure that what you're building is what you should be building. Does that make sense? So, yeah.
In most companies, is it just one person, or can it be a small group of people? Or
There could be companies that have more than one of these. I think if you get too many together, it might be a too many chefs type of thing, right? But if you have a person that's in this role that is well aware of knowing what they don't know and knows when to reach out and get information to bring back, I think that's really key. You know, and I think that's key for people in general, and you know, in the consulting industry as well. So, you know, when I'm interviewing someone for a consultant role, I pay much more attention to how they deal with questions they don't know the answer to than how they deal with questions they do. Because what you do when you don't know is so much more important than what you do when you do know. Does that make sense? So, business-driven and iterative development approach. So we talked about this a little bit, the idea of with the Blues Brothers, they had clear steps that they had to take, right? So if you remember from the Karate Kid, Daniel was trying to skip ahead in his training that Mr. Miyagi was giving him, right? He kept saying, when am I going to learn how to punch? He's learning how to block. He's sanding the floor, and he's painting the fence, and he's painting the house. Oh, and he's waxing the cars, right? Wax on, wax off. He's doing all this stuff. He's getting impatient. When am I going to learn how to punch? And this statement really makes a lot of sense. First learn stand, then learn fly. You have to learn how to do the small things first, and then you build up to the more complicated ones. So when you're talking about a BI implementation, you know, one of the things, especially in the Kimball methodology, they specify, hey, get that matrix of the things that you're working on, which things are high value and easy to implement. Start with those. Try to get the quick wins first and get that established, right? So you can do that iterative approach rather than starting with the really hard stuff. Start with stuff you can get established and get people using it, right? So do the easier things first if you can. If they're of no value, then they don't necessarily help. But try to do quicker wins at the beginning so you can build up and get that momentum, right? That also helps getting the buy-in, because if you can get something in front of business users sooner, the more likely they are to want to participate and see the value, because they will have been able to see it instead of just hear about it. User-oriented change management. So, Raiders of the Lost Ark, who's seen that? Most people? I love that movie. Absolutely love that movie. So, Indy goes through all that stuff, getting punched and shot at and having all kinds of bad things happening to him. Finally gets the Ark of the Covenant, and the government takes it. And so he's asking Major Eaton, this is the guy that essentially hired Indy to go on the quest to get the Ark of the Covenant before Hitler did, because that would have been bad. Capital B. And he's like, well, where's the Ark? We're supposed to get the Ark. It's supposed to come back to the museum. So you know, we can do stuff with it. It's a piece of history. It's a piece of archaeology, right? And Major Eaton says, well, we have top men working on it. Now, Indy knows, as does Major Eaton, that there aren't any top men on this. There aren't any. And so he says, who? And Major Eaton just comes back, top men. So Indy went through all this trouble. A fair amount of trouble. It's a fun movie if you haven't seen it. A fair amount of trouble to get the Ark of the Covenant. He went through all this effort, multiple steps, to recover this and keep it out of the hands of the Nazis and it got put in a warehouse, and nobody used it. Not that it was something that you would actually physically use, but the parallels to this being, if you go through all that trouble, all that work, all the requirements gathering, and all that development work, and all the testing, and all the UAT, to build a BI solution that goes on a shelf and nobody uses, that's not winning. So a big part of this, a big part of that, is organizational change management. The idea of convincing people and making sure they understand the nature of the value they can get from the evidence in their data to integrate into their decision making, right? And change management is a really, really important part of that. Sometimes it's changing the culture of the organization. So people learn to start integrating data into their decisions. They may fight against it, but part of the change management role is to really help them understand that and help them cope with it. Yes, it's new, yes, it's different. It's easier to just to go, yeah, that'll work, and go with it. That's very simple. That took me 2 seconds. Not even, right? I made a decision. Did I? I don't think so. User-oriented change management. Getting the users on board with knowing how to change their behavior to incorporate the evidence being produced by the BI system that you have built for them. Really important stuff.
So how do you, sometimes in organizations, I think one of the challenges on that is a lack of autonomy. Sometimes you can have the data, you can have people who are willing to make better decisions, but they find out that they need to make decisions that the culture isn't comfortable with them making. Is that something you see come up often, and is that something where there's a good strategy for trying to deal with it? Because it's kind of a bigger problem.
Yep, it can, and I think that's a big part of where that, that business sponsor comes from. That person, that sponsorship you have when or that champion, that business champion. Somebody that's high placed enough in the organization that they can actually get around some of those barriers and kind of break down some of those walls and say, you know what, these people, they're expected to make these decisions. Why are we denying them the tools to make them? That doesn't make sense. Why would we do that? Right? And sometimes it's that champion that takes that explanation to make that happen. And some organizations, the culture is just so closed off that it's really hard to succeed in that area. And a big part of that is trying to get that sponsor up front, that highly placed sponsor that gets it and can help disseminate that information, maybe help sell it, if need be, throughout that organization. There's a quote that you're going to see in a couple minutes that makes a lot of sense to that, and I don't want to spoil it because it's kind of a cool reveal. But yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So, a business-driven, scalable, and flexible technical framework. Who knows what that is? Anyone? It's the space station, the International Space Station. On what day did we launch all of that up into space? There's no such day. It was brought up in pieces. It was built in pieces, all over the place. It wasn't built in one place. It wasn't launched in a day. It was iterative, and it was driven by the needs at the time. This, to me, is an unbelievable example of BI. Because it was this iterative step, there was a massive amount of cooperation to get it done. There were lots of pieces that had to happen in order. Some of the pieces could be developed at the same time, but even then they fold into their place, right? This is a beautiful example of good communication, of people being committed, of a good business sponsorship from multiple countries, of people getting behind this project, right? This is an excellent example of putting all of the BI critical success factors into practice. And it's also really cool at the same time, But that's something that I think is an example we can think about when we're talking about BI. If you think, oh, it's impossible to get people to cooperate. We have that. It's not impossible. It might be hard, but if you have enough people behind you, if you have the right people behind you, fighting for your initiative, ideally trying to pull it from the grassroots, right? It goes up the chain if you can get people on board, including people high up in the organization on board, knowing the value of making better decisions with the evidence that you already have, right? I mean, in the case of that retailer, the people selling paint, they're not buying paintbrushes. The answer was in their data the whole time. All it took them was to go and actually dig in and find it. But the answer was sitting right there. They had it. But it took that BI solution, and it took someone going and exploring their data, trying to find this answer to get to it. All because they had cooperation up to the point of actually rolling that system out. They had people championing it. They had people working on it. They had that person spanning both the business and the technical side to make sure that the communication was good. Sustainable data quality and integrity. Not just a one-time data cleansing. Oh, we're going to bring our stuff in Excel, we'll tweak it and we'll put it back and we'll be fine. We'll be fine from then on. Sustainable. So if you think of the movie The Princess Bride, this is from the Lego version, right? So Vizzini keeps saying, inconceivable, at every moment. Anytime something happens, he says that. And Mandy Patinkin, as Inigo Montoya, says, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Right? Which is obvious. So the point here is he doesn't think Vizzini knows what this means. So essentially, they're not in agreement about what this word is. How many times have you seen in your business that people can't agree on what some value is or what some term actually means? I was at a client, one of the ones that I did, that I show here, the what's that people, it took 6 months for them to decide what a client was. Really key, and that's the glue that tied everything together. Because so many people, when you ask, who's the client? It was kind of the bank that they were sending most of their orders to. Oh, they're the client. You ask somebody else, who's the client? Oh, that's the person over at this branch of the bank that's looking for a loan. You ask somebody else. I mean, it took 6 months for them to agree. Here is what a client is. Right? Really, really important information. And if you can't agree on it, you don't have sustainable data quality and integrity. If it's the same term means different things to everybody, how can you ever get on the same page? So
that's even worse when 5 different divisions have a calculation for some variable like net sales or profit.
Oh yeah.
And they have a defensible position about that calculation.
Oh yeah.
And then you go to them and say, okay, we need to be able to have a definition of this thing for your company.
Yep.
I've seen BI projects that have 5 definitions of that calculation, and all 5 calculations are continued in the BI project, and they're defined by footnotes.
That's crazy.
Well, I could have a little on that, and it's a kind of a cautionary landmine if you're in a much larger company, especially if it's had a lot of acquisitions. Well, things like sales and profit are how executive bonuses are dealt with, and sales bonuses. So,
yep.
That was a big issue determining profit. One group included the shipping costs in their amount of cost of sales. Others
yep.
didn't. The ones that didn't, of course, gave a lot of free shipping.
Yeah.
Because
I bet they did.
the way they keep their commissions high without reducing it. So
right.
It really opened up a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's something to think about as well. There's some organizations where kind of that interdepartmental competition is really ingrained. You know, and people start getting the feeling that, hey, in my department, this is my department's data. It's not the organization's data, it's our data. And that causes those silos to go up. And when you're talking about BI, a silo is an obstacle. It does not help. And so sometimes a big part of that, before you can really get the BI going, is to have somebody, that champion, help break down those silos. Or help people realize that, hey, if we calculate this all a different way, how do we calculate profit for the organization? How do you do it? Some of these things, these are some of the things that you have to figure out in order for it to be comprehensive. Because if you can't mix data from different parts of the organization that you should be able to mix, that's a problem. And BI is not going to fix it for you. You have to fix it on the way. BI in itself is not some magical thing. It takes work. There's a lot of value to it, but it's not a magic wand.
It's a governance engagement.
Right. And sometimes that's what needs to happen first. Is, you know, so if somebody comes up to me, hey, we don't trust any of our data is junk, we want you to build an enterprise data warehouse, I say, no, I'm not going to do that. You can give me a bunch of money, but that's not going to help you. You don't need this.
Good answer.
You need some governance first. You need some way to manage your data so you can trust it before you do anything else with it. So now what? So if you think about all this, there's a great quote from one of the sources I used a lot for this. It's an article that appeared in the Journal of Computer Information Systems a few years ago. It was a study that was done at the University of South Australia, and it was called Critical Success Factors for Business Intelligence Systems. And what they did is they did a Delphi study, which is a series of interviews with experts. So they interviewed, I think it was 15, and they said in the paper why they chose 15. BI experts interviewed them, what are the critical success factors? Then they took and gathered all that data and went back to the same 15 and said, here are the things ranked according to how everybody gave it. What are the most critical ones? So they give people a chance, based on information from others, to try to get to a better answer and revise it. They then tested those answers with a series of case studies. They compared with a big BI project that failed, one that was partially successful, and 3 successes. And what they found, it was unbelievable how those critical success factors they found, the ones that I've gone through, correlated beautifully with the ones that were completely successful, had them all. The partially successful had some of them, but were missing some. The failure one, forget about it. So it was just, it's brilliant, and I've got a link to it in here. And this is one of the quotes, and this is a key one about that business sponsorship, right, about that champion. The success of 90% of our project is determined prior to the first day. The most important phase of BI happens before any code is written. Which is why I always tell our business analysts, you guys are way more important to this BI initiative than I am. Because I can build anything. But if it's the wrong thing, I'm wasting my time and I'm wasting their money. Really, really important stuff. So when you're going into a BI situation, you have to consider, okay, where am I right now? So as an organization, where are we in terms of our data? If our data is junk, BI is not going to fix it. Right? We got to get a handle on that first. Where are we now so that we know what we need to do to move forward? And where do you want to be? This helps you formulate your plan. So you know where you are, you know where you want to go. That gives you an idea of what's in between you. And you can make your plan for how to get there. And that's what you do in that last phase. Try to figure out, okay, knowing where we are. So a map, if you don't know where you are, a map doesn't help you. You have to know where you are for a map to be valuable. And if you know where you want to go, you can decide how you're going to get there. All right.